So, we've gone through the basics, you've done your preparation. Now in this final section, we're going to be looking at what's actually going to happen during your interview, what you are going to come up against. And we're going to start by looking at the different types of questions that they could potentially ask you. And here they are. We've got your motivational questions, so why this, why that, why them, tell us a bit about yourself, that kind of thing. The competency-based questions, which is tell me about a time when you've done X, tell me a little bit about specific skills you have. Strengths-based questions, which is essentially what are you good at, and technical questions. And then at the end, they'll ask, do you have any questions for us? At which point you obviously say yes. Now, these are different types of questions, it's true. However, the way you answer them is pretty much the same, whatever they ask and whatever form they ask that in. The key thing to remember is you always want to answer through examples. So if we take an example of a question, tell me about a time when you used your communication skills. It's not enough to say, I use my communication skills all the time. This is something that actually comes up quite often. People rely on, well, this is vital, I do it all the time, it's really key to my role. What they want is a specific example of a time when you have used your communication skills. And even if it's a strengths-based question or a motivational question, even a technical question, they want an example of when you have done what you are talking about. And the more specific, the better. There is actually a technique you can use to basically construct these examples so that you're hitting all the points that an employer wants from you. And it's called the STAR technique. You might have heard of it previously. Now, STAR is a simple acronym. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. And this is the way to construct your example. So let's take that communication question as the example. Okay. First, you describe the situation. What were the circumstances when you used this skill? Who, where, what, all those sort of basic questions. And then the task. What were you trying to achieve? What was the overall goal? These are the smallest parts of your answer. They set the scene, and that's pretty much it. You can do that within 1 or 2 sentences. Then you move on to the action, which is probably the most important part of your answer. What did you do? But how did you do it as well? This is where it's quite common to trip up. People can tell me what they did, that's fairly easy, but they miss out the how. And that's where the level of detail comes in. That's what is going to elevate your answer. So not just what you did, but how you did it. And the more specific, the better. You almost have to give a level of detail that is almost embarrassing. You've got to act as if the interviewer has no idea what you're talking about, and you walk them through that example step by step. This is what shows that you know what you're talking about. And then you finish with the result. What happened as a result of what you did? And that is when you finish speaking. That's when you stop. It can be really difficult to know exactly when you want to stop answering an interview question, but once you've given the result, that is when you finish. So if we want to demonstrate how this works, imagine you're the interviewer and this is what you've asked. You've asked for an example of a time that the person has worked well as part of a team, and this is what they've given you. I play football twice a week as part of a county team. We've won 6 out of 8 matches this season. What do you think you'd give that as a score? Because this is what people will do. They will essentially score your answers. So do you think that's a 0? No evidence? Or is that anything approaching a 3, which would be a detailed account? Think back to STAR. What have they given you from that formula? Now, I have known some interviewers who would be kind, like this one, and give it a 1. I have also known interviewers who would give it a 0. If you think back to the STAR technique, think about what they're giving you. They may be giving you the situation. They've not really given you the task. They may be giving you the result, but there's no action. There is no connection between those 2 sentences. For all I know, they could have been on the bench for the matches that they won, and played in the matches that they lost and been the reason that they lost. This is a bad example for obvious reasons. Now I'm going to make this quite a bit stronger, and all I'm going to do is add 2 sentences. And you can see with this, during matches, I listen to teammates for instructions, pay attention to their next moves, anticipate them, I communicate with the coach about how I could play better. They're actually describing through what they're doing what it is to be a good part of a team. What do you think you would give this? Take a second to think, and in the next slide we'll look at a potential score. Now again, I've known interviewers that would be kind and give this a 3. I have known some interviewers who would potentially give it a 2. Now, this is a lot better, there's no doubt about that. However, it's not perfect. Yes, there's a level of detail there, and there are examples that you can draw from. However, if we were going to be hypercritical, there's a few things that you could do to make this a little bit stronger. The key one for me would be giving a more specific example. I would want a specific match where their teamwork contributed to that result. What did they do as part of that team to contribute to that specific result? This is the key to a strong interview. The more specific you are, the better. You can't just talk about general terms. During matches I do this. You want, during this particular match when we were down 2-0 or whatever it might be, this is what I did and this was the result. The more specific you can be in your examples, the better and stronger your interview will be. Now the STAR technique is very helpful, but it's not going to necessarily solve all of your problems. The example still has to come from you. But if you can practice this technique, which is something you can do, you can come to us as the Careers Service, we can definitely help with all of that, then you can make sure that your examples are really strong. And then once you're asked something that maybe you're not sure about straight away, you can refer to the STAR technique and construct a really strong example quite quickly. They may ask about things that you genuinely don't have an answer to. Maybe you don't have any experience of a specific technical issue they're talking about, a specific piece of software, or maybe you just don't have any experience in something that they ask you about. That's absolutely fine. It's always better to be honest. Try not to bluff. It actually is very obvious when someone is trying to bluff their way through a question. And it's much better if you're just honest, and it actually can be quite impressive in a lot of ways to say, I'm sorry, I don't have any experience of that previously. Make sure you take your time. It's absolutely allowed. It's allowed to take a pause or just say something like, can we come back to that? Can I just have a quick moment to think? I guarantee you, whatever pause you make will sound a lot longer to you than it will to the individual who's listening. And if worse comes to worse and you have absolutely no experience, you have no example to draw from, you've never done something like that before, then talk about how you would do it. Something like, I've never done that before, but here's how I handled something similar. I've never done that before, but here's how I would tackle it in that situation. That's absolutely fine to do. The key thing is, if you don't know the answer, just try not to panic. There's always a way to answer those questions. Before we finish on during the interview, there's a few key things that I want you to take away. First, it's absolutely fine, and in fact I would encourage you to make notes as you're going through. It's a really good technique to write the question that they ask down as they ask it, to have something to refer to. It's one of those things that can stop you from forgetting part of the question if it's in 2 parts, and it just gives you that confidence to think, have I referred to everything that they've asked in this question? Yes, because you've got it in front of you. Make sure you take your time. You always have more than you think, and any pause you make, like I said in the previous slide, is going to sound a lot longer to you than it does to the person listening. A couple of things to hopefully settle your nerves. Always remember, an interview is a two-way street. It's very easy to feel like you don't have any power in the situation. You're completely on show and they've got that decision. That's partly true, but you are interviewing the company. You are trying to make a decision, do I want to work for these people? They've got to do some convincing to get you to want to work there. So think about it in those terms, reframe it as much as you can. This will help you to think of actual questions you want to ask them. Things like, what's the day-to-day of the role? What does success look like in this role 3, 6, 12 months down the line? Ask the things that you are genuinely curious about, things that you actually want to know to make a decision as to whether you want to work there. And when you're constructing your examples, make sure that you're talking about things that you really are proud of, things that you think, yes, this really does answer that question, answer it really well. This is where your preparation comes into it. You don't necessarily need a rehearsed answer for absolutely everything they could ask you. That's probably the wrong way to go. But if when you're doing your preparation you have an example in the back of your mind for the kind of things that they could ask you, that is really good practice. All of this brings us to after your interview, and there are a few key things that you want to keep in mind once you've finished. Now obviously, if it's a yes, fantastic, you've done really well. You'll still have a few things to think about. Do you actually want the job as a start? That's a genuine question you don't have to accept, even if they've offered you the job if you don't want it. If you do you then have to let someone else down? Have you got multiple offers that you're having to decide between and you have to let somebody else know that you're not going to take the job? But also, brilliant, celebrate, absolutely fantastic. If it's a no, then there are a few things that you want to be thinking about. First, ask for feedback. Feedback is a gift. You're not always going to get it, and you can't expect them to go into masses of detail, but any feedback you can get on how you did, how you could improve, is always really useful. It's very unlikely you're going to succeed at every interview, and you want to know where you need to improve. And the best way to do that is getting feedback. And if you can't get any feedback, or even if you can, think about how the interview went. What would you do differently? Is there anything that is coming up regularly that you think is a problem for you? Do you need to get support from that? Always think about your experience and reflect. It's often said that an interview is a learning experience, if nothing else. That is absolutely true. Treat it as such. Which brings us to the end. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I really hope that's been helpful. But if you feel like you could do with more support, please do get in touch. Our contact details are on the screen now, careers.info@manchester.ac.uk. Send us an email, book an appointment with one of our consultants, book an interview sim, come to one of the live sessions that we're running in the atrium. Please do get in touch and make use of us. We are more than happy to help, and any support we can offer, we're really keen to get to you. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.